I welcome you back once again to our next session of the day. And the session is from Lavanya Mohan, who is QA engineer at Grab, and she's going to present how do we treat test code as a production code. Lavanya, are you there? Oh, I see you already. Super.
Yes, can you hear me as well?
Perfectly, loud and clear.
Great.
It's nice to have you here, Lavanya. I think with a pleasure. I would let you share your screen and you could start with your presentation. Wonderful. I see you, we hear you, and you're all set.
Great. Can you also see it over there and the emulator?
Everything, yes.
All right, great. We get started?
Please do.
All right, thank you. So today I'm going to be talking about treating test code as production code. Now, maybe a lot of things come to mind when we just hear this topic, right? But what we're going to specifically talk about today is writing clean test code. Okay, so in this session, we will look at what is clean code. We will see a demo app, which will be our application under test. We will see the test code for that application. We'll identify code smells and then iteratively refactor to make it better. Okay, so let's get started. What is clean code? This is a particular definition of clean code by Grady Booch, which I read in a book that really resonates with me. It says, clean code is simple and direct. Clean code reads like well-written prose. Now, the reason this definition resonates with me a lot is because it talks about the readability of code. Yeah, and usually we read our code a lot more than writing code, especially during the maintenance phase. So that's why this definition really resonates with me and I really like it. So I want you all to think about the readability of code today, okay? So let's look at our demo app. This is an app which gives us information about books, a pretty simple app. So here on the home screen, we can search for a book. Let's say I search for a book called Harry. Then I get a list of search results where there is author name and title. And let's say I select one of these books. Then I'm taken to a book details page where there is additional information of the book, like number of pages, the year in which it was published, and so on. Okay, that's all. So a pretty simple app. It just has 3 screens: the home screen, the search results screen, and the book details screen. Okay, now let's look at our test code for this app. Assume that somebody else has written this code, and now you've taken the responsibility for it. All right. Now this code is written in Java and it uses Appium. There is just one test file in this code base, and currently it has 2 tests. The first test is search results test, and the second one is to verify book details. Okay. Now this looks like a pretty long file. Let's take it step by step. Let's just look at our first test, right, which is for verifying the search results. Let's see what this does. So here, the first thing that's happening is we are typing search results, the send keys bar, and then we're clicking on the search books button on the homepage, this one. After that, we wait for the presence of title. Now, why are we waiting? Because after doing a click, like after saying search, this page takes a little time to load. So there's a wait for title, and then we are getting all the strings of the title. And then there is some kind of an assertion here. We'll come back to this assertion later, okay? Now that you've just seen this code, does it feel like it's doing too many things? That brings us to our first problem, that there is no single responsibility. Okay, and why is this a problem? Because that means that the test can change for multiple reasons, and the readability is pretty bad, and of course it's difficult to maintain in the long run. So let's try to do something about it, and we'll take it step by step. Okay, so let's just first look at these 2 lines. These 2 lines are essentially just searching for a book, right? So maybe we should extract that out into a method. So let me say search books. I'll just extract it out in the method. So what we did right now is the test has what is to be done, which is searching books, and how the books should be searched is now the responsibility of this particular method. So it's a great first step, right? We are doing some sort of abstraction. We're abstracting out the house. So this is a great first step. But now let's think about it. Is the how part of searching a book really the responsibility of this test class? Is it? What do you feel? No, right? It's probably a responsibility of a class which represents this particular page or maybe this particular component on the UI. So maybe what I could do right now is create a homepage and move the responsibility of how to search for a book in the homepage. Okay, so let me do that. I'll first create a package called pages, and then I'll create a class called homepage. And I will just move this method to the homepage. Now it says it can't find driver. We will come to that in a bit. And in the test, now we will actually call the search books method, which is present in the homepage. It needs to be public, so I modified that. Okay. Now we know that the search book methods needs a driver, so let's pass it in the constructor, and we will initialize our driver here. Okay. So what have we done so far? What we have done right now is we created a class which represents this particular page on the UI, and we moved the responsibility of how to search for a book in this particular class. Okay, now this is nice. And what this essentially is, actually there's a name for this, and that's the page object pattern, right? And what does the page object pattern actually say? It says that we create classes that represents components on the page, like components, UI components, or the page itself. And the methods in this class are basically services that are offered by this component. Okay, so our method, the service that we offer in the home page is, for example, searching for a book, and that is our method. All right. Okay, let's see this particular method that we just created in a little more detail. Now the return type here is void. What does void usually mean? It means side effect, right? But what's actually happening on the UI when we do a search? Actually on the UI, a new page is opened, correct? A search results page is opened. So should this method return an instance of a search results page? We haven't created that page, but maybe we will. But should this method return an instance of that particular page? Now the Selenium's documentation on page object model says that these methods should return page objects, right? But before we get to doing that, let's understand the pros and cons. So should we return them? Now the pros of this is the method conveys exactly what changes happened on the UI. So just by looking at the method signature, I will know that it opened the search results page. So that's good. And it will also allow us to do method chaining. We'll come to that shortly. But remember, there are also some cons. So let's see what they are. The pages now become tightly coupled. What does that mean? The home page, for example, will know about the search results page. And maybe the search results page will know about the book details page. So the pages are just tightly coupled. They know about each other. And maybe sometimes we might need to do special handling. Let's take an example of a login method maybe. And let's say that our app, the app under test, returns either the dashboard page or a regular home page based on whether you've logged in as an admin user or a regular user, right? So if this is the scenario that you want to automate, then you probably will have to create two different login methods in your test code, or maybe you will do some sort of an inheritance and then typecasting, which leads to duplication. Yeah, so there's a talk by Titus Fortner, which I have linked here. And he is strongly against returning page objects. And I'm also actually tending towards this now. But since most of us return page objects anyway. Let's see how to write good code even on returning page objects from our methods. Okay, so what we're saying is now our search book method should return an instance of the search results page, right? So let me first create a search results page. I'm just going to clone this one for now. And I will remove the unrelated method. And in the search books method, we will now return an instance of the search results page. Okay, great. Now let's look at our test code again. We did a search. What's next? Next, this entire chunk of code is for getting the search result titles, correct? So instead of having the how part here, let me first extract it out into a method. Maybe I can say get search result titles. Is that okay? Maybe for now. And then let's repeat our drill. Does the how of getting search result, is that the responsibility of this test class? No, it's probably a responsibility of a class which represents this screen. So let's move it to our search results page that we just created. Again, I'll make this method public so that it's accessible in our test. And now let's see how we can do method chaining. So we said search a book, and then we're saying get the search result titles, right? And we could do this chaining, basically use the dot operator, because our search book method returned an object of the search results page. Okay, great. And let me assign it to a variable called titles so that this compilation error is gone. Nice. Now, aren't you feeling that the test is looking slightly better already? I hope you do feel that. Let's look at this search results title method that we just created. Now, just by looking at this method, do you feel that there is something very wrong? Well, of course, it's pretty long, but there is also duplication of locators. And why is this kind of duplication bad? Because if it changes, it needs to change at multiple locations. And of course, it becomes very difficult to maintain in the long run. And we have to think about maintainability, right? Like if you heard Mike's talk earlier, that's probably the biggest problem that all of us face. So let me extract this out into a variable called title. I'll move this locator at the top of my class. If you're using some frameworks, then maybe you could also extract it out into configs. For now, I will just leave it at the top of my class. And like all my locators in one place. Okay, that's one level better. We removed duplication. But there are also some more problems in this code. Like this one, WebDriver wait. It's a good thing we're using WebDriver wait and we're not using sleep. So I am going to appreciate the person who wrote this code for that. But it's currently in a local method, right? That does not seem very right. This should be probably accessible to all the methods because there will be multiple methods which might need it. So we will initialize it in our constructor. Okay, so I just moved it at the top. Also, why is this 20 seconds? I really don't know. Maybe it is historical reasons. For now, I'm just going to leave that magic number there, but I'll just put it in a variable. Okay, something else here. Now, after we find all our elements, we want to get the text values, right? So we loop through them, we get the text values and put that in an array list, and then we are returning that array. This does its job, sure. But is that something that can be done better? Because this is still not very easily readable. It takes us a little more time to process what's happening. So can we make it better? If you're using Java 8 or above, the language itself gives you some features that can help readability. So we could say something like, get all the text and collect it in a list. All right, and we'll just return the list. So instead of all these lines, we could essentially just use the language feature and make it way more readable, because this is definitely a lot more natural to read. And our IDE itself tells us that, hey, you can even improve this further by using lambdas here, right? So this is a great thing, right? We should keep exploring what our language allows us and try to use them to improve our readability. And now instead of calling this title elements, I'm just going to call it titles because that probably makes more sense. Okay. All right, let's go back to our test. Now let's see what this is doing. This is some assertion, but just look at it. There's a Boolean variable, there's a for loop, there's an if statement, there's a break. Like, I don't think anybody who's reading this for the first time will understand what's actually going on. It's going to take a long time to really understand the intent of this assertion, right? So can we make it better? Can we make it better? We should, because this is definitely missing simplicity, correct? So maybe we could use a similar language feature that we just saw and try to make it better. So we can just say, match all the titles such that title dot lowercase contains the search term Harry. Yeah. And we do the assertion. So basically, we've removed all these for loop and if statement and I don't know what into something that's so much more natural to read and so much cleaner, right? So we changed our test from what looked like this earlier, which was just too much information, to something like this, which is definitely more readable. I hope you agree. Do you agree? You can say a yes in the comments if you do. Okay, let's move ahead to the next test maybe. Okay. Now this is to verify book details. Let's see what this test is doing. We are again searching for a book. So maybe I will just replace it with what we had earlier. We had a search books method in our homepage, correct? So let me just use that. Oh, okay, we search for a book called Harry. Extract this out into a search term. What is it doing next? Again, after searching for a book, it waits for the title to be present, and then it is clicking on the first something in a given position. So basically, it is selecting a book. Okay. So instead of having all these details of how to select a book in this test, let's abstract it out. Right? Let's abstract the details out. It's always good to have some abstraction in such cases. So maybe we could say select book at position. Now let's repeat our drill. Right? Selecting a book at position. Does the responsibility of how to select a book lie with this test? I guess not. It lies with a class that represents this, correct? Which would be our search results page. So let's move this to our search results page. I'll again make this method public so that it's accessible. Now we already have initialized WebDriver wait earlier, so I can remove this. Again, there is duplication of locators, so let's get rid of that. Okay, nice. In our test, we will do chaining. So we could say search for a book and then select a book. Okay, much better. Now let's look at this method that we just created and see whether there is some problem. Do any of you see some problem? There is duplication of code. Where? Look at this. Here we are waiting for titles to be present and then we're getting all the titles. We are doing the same in the earlier method that we created, where we wait for titles and get the titles. The only difference is in this case we are selecting it, so we're clicking on it. In this case, we are just taking all the strings, the text, and returning it. Yeah, but the starting, the first part of getting all the titles, all the elements is just the same in both cases. So let's extract it out into another method. So we can say get titles, maybe. Yeah, and the ID itself says that there's another occurrence of that. So let's replace that as well. Great, now our code looks much better. There is less duplication. Yeah, I'm going to move this below. Okay, let's again focus on this select book at position method, which we just created. And let's repeat a drill. So this return type is void, but what actually happens on the UI when we select a book? It opens the book details page, correct? So maybe this method should return the book details page. So let's create a book details page first. I will again clone this and remove all the methods that are not related to book details. And in this method, where we select a book, we return an object of book details page. Okay. Nice. Now let's go back to our test. What have we done so far in this test? We searched for a book. We selected a book at particular position. And now we're doing something else here. What is this? We are waiting for number of pages to be present. So that's essentially this particular element. And then we get the number of pages. And then we're doing an assertion here that it should be greater than 0. Right? So this portion that is present here is essentially waiting, it is getting the number of pages. So let's repeat our drill. We will abstract out the house. We can say get number of pages. This ID itself is telling me, giving me a nice method name. So I'll use that. Now I'll think about where should this be? The responsibility of this lies with a class which represents this book details, correct? So let's move it to our book details page that we just created. Okay, we already have a WebDriver wait there, so let's use that. Then we have some duplication of locators again. So let's remove that duplication. You can call it number of pages. Oh, I want to say full name, so okay. And I will move it at the top. Right. So these locators don't have to be accessed by any other pages, right? That's why I'm making them private. Now let's go back to our test. And what can we do? After selecting a book, we can get the number of pages. Let's assign it to a variable. And then we do our assertion. Great. Now our test looks so much smaller, correct? From what it was earlier, so many lines of code with all different responsibilities of how to do, to something definitely more concise, which tells you what is to be done, right? Nice. So our test definitely looks much better. We've done some amount of refactoring, and this is great. But there are some issues here as well. Let's look at them. What's the first one? There are unused imports. Now, when we do refactoring, when we move things around, there is a lot of chance that our imports, that we've imported things which we've never used, right? And some people may say that, well, the ID generally hides it anyway, so why should we care? Well, we should care because it still causes some clutter, and it shows up during our searching, like for example, and maybe gives us an incorrect indication that it is being used. So we should remove it. Let me use a keyboard shortcut to remove it. Nice. Now let's look at another problem that's present in this class. The class name is pretty bad. Yeah. Did any of you notice that? This class, this test class is called test cases. Now, what does that even mean? Does it mean it has all the tests that are present for this particular app? We don't know. That does not convey anything, right? And the problem with such badly named tests is if you want to search for a test, it's difficult because you don't know where to look. And also unrelated tests are generally grouped together, which is pretty bad as well. So maybe I will rename it. Let me call this search results test. Hey, but search result test should not have tests related to book details, correct? So let's remove that. And we can create another one for book details. And I'll just move the book details related test here. Great, much better. But now I want you to look at this book details test in a little more detail. Yeah. What are we saying here? We're saying search for a book, select a book at some position, get the number of pages, and then do an assertion. Well, it's definitely more readable from what it was earlier, but still, is the intent of the page getting covered clearly? Is it? Maybe not, right? It still has a lot of details. And that probably brings to the discussion of whether our test should be declarative or imperative. And this seems like a test with a lot of details and maybe unnecessary. So maybe we could also have a level of abstraction here, right? And how can we do that? Well, there is a talk by Anand Bagmar where he talks about business layer page object models. So I've linked the talk here. What does that mean? So currently we have tests which directly talk to pages, right? But we could have tests which talk to business layer, something in between, and this business layer talks to either other business layers or to pages. So the advantage of this is that all the business logic will get abstracted into the business layer. Now you may say that this sounds like an overkill for a small app like this, which has just 3 pages, maybe. But usually the apps that we work on, the projects that we're working on is far more complex. So something like this will definitely help. And how? Our test could become something as small as verify book details. So the intent is just completely clear when we just look at this. And if we want to know more details about how we are verifying book details, then we could go into that business layer and see. Okay. So imagine like a app where you want to search for hotels, which is like a Make My Trip app, for example, right? You have to enter so many different things. You have to enter the location, the check-in date, check-out date, number of people, number of rooms, adults, children, your purpose of stay, maybe all that, right? Now imagine you have all those business logics in your test. Then when somebody looks at the test, they will just not know what the intent of that test is. So abstracting that business logic into another layer is really good. It has worked for me, and it's something that you could also explore a little more. Okay, let's move ahead. This is probably my only slide in green because I cannot emphasize on how important it is. Keep running your tests often till there are logical changes, and commit and push. Now, we didn't run the tests in all the refactoring that we did today in the interest of time. So I'm hoping that the tests pass. But yeah, we should ideally run tests pretty often whenever we make logical changes. And why I say that is, like sometimes when we start refactoring, we get into it so much that we make a whole lot of changes. And then finally, when we run the test, something fails. And it becomes tricky to really know where it failed. Yeah. And also,
Lavanya, sorry to interrupt you, but we are kind of running short of time. So I would propose you continue for 2 minutes more, and all the questions you could take directly in a Slack channel. Okay,
sure. Yeah, I'm almost done anyway. All right, I'm giving my fingers crossed. I hope the test pass, right? So this was the first test for book details. Let's see what happens to our second test. And in the meantime, I also want to speak about what more does it take to write clean code, okay? Yay, the tests are green, I think. Cool. So yeah, what more does it take? So we can definitely read a lot. We can definitely look at other people's GitHub repositories. We can explore some frameworks. So Rahul spoke about Arjuna, right? Which is great. So we could try all that. But apart from all that, I think it takes a lot of discipline. Now, why do I say that? Because it's easy to say, hey, it's working, so never mind. Or it's easy to say, I have 100 other important tasks, so I will come back to this later. And it's okay to say I will come back to it later, but you should come back to it sooner than later. You know what I mean? So it does take discipline, and not just from one individual, but from the entire team. And probably that's why it's so difficult to achieve as well. All right. So with that, I would like to just show you the references. So the GitHub links are present here, both app and the test code, the two talks that I mentioned, and also the book that I spoke about. I'm happy to take questions if there is time. And thank you.
Excellent. So we could use a couple of minutes now from the transition phase to the break. If people want to stay, they could stay here. One question, the point you mentioned regarding tightly coupling, and it's not a good practice to return other page objects from one page object class. What should be better approach to get rid of this coupling?
So what Titus Fortner mentions in his talk is let it just be void. And then in our test, we could just instantiate a new, like generally how we say it, new search results page dot get all the result titles. So we could just do that. And then that would mean that we can't do, like we can't use the dot operator in that case, which is probably something that you would want maybe, but at least the coupling is gone. Does that make sense?
I guess so. But if Nishant, if you have follow-up question on this, you could talk to Lavanya in person or directly through the Slack channel meant for her talk. So Lavanya, thank you so very much. It was an honor and a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for interesting talk. And I wish you all a nice break and see you soon in 15 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you for hosting me. Also special thanks to Anand Bagmar because he recommended my name for this conference and also helped me review my presentation. So thank you.
Excellent.
And you guys are doing a great job. I really, really like it.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for having me.